Well, hello everyone. You have right here, I'm talking about responsibilities right here. And a lot of times it sure seems that way, that what exactly is it when we do speak about responsibilities a lot of times? What exactly is it that we're referring to? Well, I mean, that could be referred to in a lot of ways, right? And, you're thinking as to where okay, yeah, saying your responsibility is another way of how you want to cause as to where it, you want to take charge of something. You want to be, like, yeah, you want to go ahead and run something. You want to go ahead and manage something. And a lot of times, like everybody else might say, is to where it basically means is to where that you are in charge of, how things are running and then maybe how things are arranged and all that. And so every time you do think about that, and you're 102, that, yeah, every time you hear the word manager, especially if it's a management position or something like that, that you might hear the typical words such as that yeah, for who's in charge, who's yeah, about the responsibility right here. And so if you want to look at this as toward it, like people might say, is toward it, yeah, when we do speak about responsibility right here. But some of us might say that, yeah, well, maybe utility bills or something like that is one way to start. And then another way is like, to where you go ahead and, maybe if it's marital status or something like that. But a lot of times it's like, yeah, that every time you do think about that and you're wanting to where, okay, yeah, that, knowing about with, like, yeah, with great power and great responsibility and maybe other sorts of responsibilities that you've heard about, and still, but it's like each time I think about that, and you 102 is that yeah, talk about for responsibility right here, but I'll go and show everybody here. This right here is actually a picture. So like, let's just say I'm like, yeah, it's a drawing right here, and but really, so you have these two page documents right here. These two documents right here. So in case if anybody were to be asking me that, really, what is the best way of how to describe a responsibility? And so you're 102 that, yeah, do you expect anybody to really understand what you're talking about just by looking at just, the first two pages right here on this document right here? And let's just say that this right here was supposed to be like a story that was put together right here. You talk about right here, talking about that, yeah, solving problems and all that, and setting a few goals. But that this page right here is supposed to talk about is toward, yeah, that you met this person, maybe, yeah, you met this person at a New Year's party, and then you start talking about a lot of things that you were agreeing to, where that you will work together as a team, such as that whenever you do get married, and maybe whenever you do take on a big responsibility for something that you were trying to achieve. And let's just say that, yeah, something that you were working for, that that you knew that thought you'll be that would make a difference, right? And so every time you think about that right here, and I thought I'd go in and tell everybody, like, so yeah, that you have right here this painting right here, this infographic right here, and also right here. So it's like these two images right here are supposed to represent what you call this happy couple right here. This is how we met right here, and the top of the page right there is like an infographic, and like everybody else might say, is to where it for any reason at all that why you use that, and maybe that exactly for anything that you want to talk, like, yeah, talk about for disability, right? But you see right here that that the way I had this arranged right here, talk about for special right here. So it's like so each time you have this conversation, a lot of times, I mean, it sure seems that way. That yeah, that you would look at your photo. I'm like, you would actually look at an actual image of a photograph right here with the background image right here, the American flag. But then you would write on here your responsibility right here. And so it's like, yeah, so whenever you say that your responsibility right here, it's another way of how do you want to cause, is to where it's like an assignment. It's like a rule to where that you are responsible for taking care of this, maintaining these tasks and these priorities. And so it sure seems that way that each time you think about that, and your 102 is to where that you want to look at that as another way of it's like it's a rule to where that rules that you would need to follow, or like people might say, is it really all about you trying to understand what all that needs to be done, and so it's like so each time you think about that 102, whenever you do think about a citizenship and all that, is to where you may be thinking about is that whenever I grow up, not very many people, not everybody really has asked me that question before. So like, let's just say that on the sentence right here is I put on here whenever I grow up, that this is what my achievements, this is what my achievement is whenever I grow up. Whenever I grow up, these are the things that I'm going to look forward to doing right here. And so let's just say that, so I can just put on here like, bullet, to word it up. And then one of those is like, owning my own business or something like that. So if I were to say something like that right there, and let's just say that if I people might say is toward it. So every time you do think about that, talk about for responsibility, right? But like it sure seems that way that if you're going to be so like let's just say that if you're going to go ahead and start another line right down here, and let's just say that something like is toward it while I was dreaming, I was thinking about a lot of things that not everyone can see. So it sure seems that way that, whenever you do talk about stuff like that, and like people might say is to, what about the things that you can see that maybe not everybody else can see right here? But this right here is a drawing right here that I was working on right here in Photoshop. You have right here this married couple right here, and this couple right here. I'm like, this dating couple. I guess I could say is that more of a dating couple right here. And you see this right here. It's kind of like chin to chin right here, but still that. So one way of how to describe a marital license would be is toward it. So like let's just say that on that day on New Year's Eve that you were at a party, and then this is how you met this person right here. That whenever you were dancing with them, that you were having your talks, right? And so it's like so it's like. So whenever you do think about that, and you're 102, first of all, it's like you want to go ahead and you draw this picture right here, like everybody else may say, is that you go ahead and draw a picture or do something creative that kind of gets your mind set to where that one of these days if you do meet somebody special, but it's like whenever you do think about that in 102, that you go ahead and draw a sketch like this right here to where that you were at a party that maybe you were dreaming that you were at a party talking to somebody about something, and let's just say if it was a New Year's party, New Year's resolution or something somewhere like that, and let's just say that if you put together this painting right here, but then you put right here this document right here, these two images right here, and you just start talking about a few things right here, and like say not everybody is really going to understand all that right there, and that's why it's like say you start talking about it, and 102 is to where that we're really about to talk about for responsibility, right? And so when you talk about this is that responsibilities are pretty much tasks that need to be directed or followed based on the important, based on the important needs. When it comes to knowing what is needed. So if I were to say something like that, and like everybody else may say that, that you go ahead and write on here, on it, like on this document right here, I can go ahead and move this further down here so we can see that. But you see this right here that whenever we do speak about responsibility, a lot of times that you don't want to get that confused with party, like everybody else might say, is to where that whenever you do think about responsibility, that you're also talking about is to where like like a like a company, like like a and another way I can also look at it is to where I'm like I can explain about that is that knowing that talk about for marital status, so it's like so half the time you want to know too is that that whenever you do think about responsibility, a lot of times that the first thing that really comes to your mind will be is toward it. Whenever you do think about responsibility, though, that the first thing that you think about is that I think I can handle that, or that if I just like everybody else might say, is that whenever the first thing that you think about responsibility, knowing that that you actually would like are you gonna are you willing to overcome those difficult challenges? And a lot of times it's like everybody else might say is that that seems like that's the first thing that's really going to come to your mind is toward it that whenever you do whenever you do get older, whenever you do grow up, and then whenever you do get older, that you realize all the work that's needed, right? And 102 about the most difficult challenges, and one of those most difficult challenges, like as we all know, I'm like that about the about the challenges, right? One of those difficult challenges, of course, is going to be about is toward it that you picture in your mind over something that you are going to look forward to, number one. So it's like every time you think about that, and you're wondering to where that the first thing that you think about, you try to picture in your mind what something is going to look like, before you actually like anybody say, I'm like for sure, whenever you do think about a lot of those responsibilities, whenever it comes to doing something. And it sure seems that way that you're thinking, well, with most of those responsibilities, it's like you're like, well, really, that you picture in your mind of something that you look forward to, especially, and let's just say if one of those things is maybe going to be about is toward that you're going to go ahead and take responsibility of filling out a few applications or something like that, or maybe keeping track of the paperwork, or maybe filling out, keeping track of the papers, maybe signing a document, that sorts of stuff. So every time we think about responsibilities, though, it sure seems that way that they're basically they're rules, right? And I can go and write that right down here to where it knowing about what these rules, and with one of those rules is going to be is that like everybody say, is toward the rules. What are the rules necessarily that is toward it? Well, really, that maintaining. So every time we think about that, what are the rules necessarily? And so every time we, every time we do think about that, and you want to think about it as a rule to where that you're not at no party, and you can still have fun, but really that you need to know that whenever you are going to be handling your responsibilities, for sure that yeah, a lot of things that you do see about that in the 102 that you try to picture in your mind about at least a couple of things that you really look forward to. And 102, yeah, if it's maybe going to be dating and relationship, maybe if it's going to be a marital status or something like that, maybe having children or something like that, and that's why it seems like that whenever you do picture something in your mind, in your word toward it, yeah, that you picture something in your mind for that reason. And you want to know too that you were looking forward to this good opportunity for this something that you've been looking forward to, right? And a lot of times it sure seems that way that yeah, that so whenever you do think about responsibility though, it's like, yeah, you run into a lot of rough challenges, and one of those rough challenges, of course, is maybe going to be about as to where that yeah, that knowing that number one, if you cannot get everybody to agree on something that you were working on, and two, like like I was talking about earlier, talking about the for questions and all, but still that but whenever we do speak about responsibilities, for the most part, that it's like the way we use them. Like, yeah, talking about I can put on here. I could put on here at the top right here. Talking about the full time. I mean, I don't really know if that really even matters, full time or just yeah, full time or just temporary or something like that. So it's like full time or just temporary right there. And so yeah, so it's like each time. So each time you're going to be thinking about that and 102 that okay, yeah, that so in case if anybody were to ask you that whenever you do speak about responsibilities a lot of times that that the first thing that's really going to come to your mind is toward yeah, I know I can handle that because yeah, you were able to keep track, you were able to manage a bit. I'm like, yeah, one of the bigger responsibilities that you did have, of course, back whenever you were younger, of course, was having I'm like, yeah, having a party or maybe running. I'm like, yeah, knowing about how to manage something especially. But a lot of times it sure seems that way. That each time we do speak about a responsibility, a lot of times you'll want to know too that yeah, well, what's one thing to keep in mind whenever we do speak about responsibilities? A lot of times I can go ahead and put on here. Yeah, go ahead and move this over here if I can, and then put that in the background right there. But I see here. Okay. Yeah, I'm like, yeah. Alright. Just adding right here yellow background right here, and so that way we can add a little bit of color right there. Add a little color right there. Okay. Anyway, yeah, I all that color, but anyway, yeah, I was just going to add a little gradient right there, but I'm just going to say something right here. But yeah, you talk about for responsibilities right here. So like everybody else might say that whenever you're going to be having a discussion right here on the left right here, and let's just say like on the right here, is toward people might even thinking too is that that you think you really think you can handle all of the important task when it comes to managing something, especially when it comes to running things the way that you would like to run them. But on the other hand, that you do realize, that you do realize that the work that is needed are for the more for what you can handle. So really, what does that really mean right there? So like if I were to say something like that, so it's like each time you want to think about that in 102 is to where that, what exactly, it like, so every time you do think about any source of responsibility that you're going to be working on, right? And 102 is toward it, how would you handle that, and what would you do in case if, for any reason at all, in case if something were to happen, in case if something were to go wrong, right? But still, it's like whenever we do speak about responsibilities a lot of times and thinking as to where, okay, so whenever we do look at that right there in 102, that, okay, that, your responsibility right there. And so really that, your responsibility right there, and like people might even say too that, instead of, I'm like, you would actually write your name, but instead of thinking about that is toward, that, whenever you do think about any source of responsibility, that it's like, it's just another way of saying it is toward you are in charge of how to run this and how to run that. And whenever you are in charge of running something, for sure, like people might say that, if you would go ahead and write that somewhere right here, if you're in charge. If you are in charge of running something. If you're in charge of running something. Whenever you are in charge of running something, it's another way of how do you want to call it. It's like for basic management, right? And, I know it. I'm not trying to say in charge, but anyway, in charge, whenever you're in charge of running something. Oh, I'm trying to put it in a, like, dash. You're trying to put it in one word right here. But anyway. So pretty much it's like whenever you do think about any source of responsibility, right? Whenever you're in charge of something. So what is really, what exactly does that mean? Like everybody might say, the number of times that you read that rule in the instructions, or like everybody else to say that whenever you're going to be working any source of job, really, that, companies or any job, they're going to go ahead and leave you in charge of working on something, right? Doing something. And the first thing that you're going to probably see is that, they're going to go ahead and leave you in charge of taking care of these tasks right here. And people might say is toward that, you'll take care of it and all, but still, that. So what's one way of how to think about a responsibility though, and like in 102 is to where you want to look at that as a challenge or just a typical test or something like that. But really though, that the only thing that you really were thinking about during the time, most of the time, was like that you would actually picture in your mind of what exactly is it. I'm like what's one the key factor, remember, is just know about responsibility. You probably thinking as to where you were picturing in your mind about maybe a lot of things that you're going to look forward to taking on a responsibility and maybe seeing it, and experiencing that responsibility. And 102 is to word it, whenever you go into your adult stage and maybe your teenage stage or somewhere like that, some way like that of how to describe it, and you're warned toward it, that whenever you do think about a responsibility, though, that you're thinking is toward it, well, really, that number one, that you actually want. I'm like, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact about that, being known. I'm like, for doing things. I'm like, for if it's independently or anything like that, like everybody else might say, is toward it, that. And I can be honest with everybody here that that every time you do think about that, and 102 is to where that whenever you do think about responsibility, a lot of times is that you actually want to impress everybody. You want to impress somebody just by showing them what your ability is whenever you do take on a new responsibility. Like, well, I would like to show you how far I can come with what I know. And a lot of times that's probably how everybody else would probably word it, is to where if you were working on something and if you were working really hard on something, that you would overcome a lot of those difficult challenges, right? And one of those difficult challenges would be is to where that do you think that you'll be able to handle that responsibility? Well, of course I can. Well, how? You'll show us how you will be able to handle that. So that's why it seems that way to where it, do we think that maybe, like everybody else might say, is to where, do you think that everybody would say is to where, you would go ahead and maybe somebody would ask you to please show me a little bit examples of the work that you do and maybe how you're handling it. It just, if you were actually there, right? If you were actually there at that location. And then maybe that's another reason why, like everybody else would say, is to where every time you do think about responsibility, that you're going to be thinking about is that resources, and I could put on like I can go ahead and maybe put on here at the bottom is to where proof and resources, and I can mention resources down here too. But it's like, so whenever you do think about resources a lot of times, like everybody says, to where, resources, resources. Resources, that's basically, it's another way of how do you want to call it, to where benefits. And, I don't know if people might say, if you want to go ahead and use that tough, but, you place it somewhere so that way we can all see it right here. Yeah, I know it. I can... a new artboard, but still, I have resources right here. So where do I want to put this? Right here. Yeah, I could put it like right here, so we can all see it, right? Just put it right there. But still, that So if if that right there is supposed to be like any source of advertisement, right? And U102 that if we're trying to teach somebody the basics about how to take care of something, about how to handle something and how to take care of something, right? That the first thing that you're going to maybe say is to where that the first thing you're going to probably ask is that what is the worst thing that can happen? And so it's like, what's So really, what is the worst thing that can happen? And it seems like to me that like yeah, whenever you do write a sentence, kind of like that right there, like everybody say that if you want to go ahead and maybe change a little bit of the character and style, but still that so it's like whenever you do whenever you do take on a new role, a new responsibility, for something, it seems like that you always want to know, you always want to know too that why can't you really discuss a lot of these things even on a resume, like the things that you really never really thought of, like you want to know too, is to where that do you think that it's best to go ahead and write something down on paper just to kind of brainstorm some ideas about as to where yeah, they kind of like I don't know if you want to kind of call them genres or anything, but whenever you do think about any source of responsibility, though, and like say that, yeah, you got the idea just by looking at some sorts of painting infographic, but still, that, so if you were to ask that question as to where really, what is the worst thing that can happen? And, so like, let's just say that, yeah, that like people might say that, well, really, that, you remember asking the question, but, you're trying to remember what was the response, and, yeah, what was the response? Like, well, I don't get it. So it's like, so somebody might even say that, yeah, that, I can't, I don't get it. But still, yeah, I don't get it. So let's just say that, yeah, so if you were to see this maybe like on an application, if you were to put that to the challenge right there, people might say, yeah, really, what is the worst thing that can happen whenever it comes to responsibilities? And people might say is to word it, yeah, if you're going to respond to something like that, you don't really have to respond, to where I'm like, yeah, people might say that, yeah, you may write to the point where maybe not everybody can really read it, but number one, that if somebody does not agree with what you responded to, for sure, that's going to maybe cause any sorts of argument and any sorts of discussions, and so that's why it seems like to where really, what is the worst thing that can happen whenever you do take on any source of responsibility, though, is to where knowing is to where that whenever you do think about that, is to where that picture in your mind about something that you would need to prevent from happening. And let's just say that, yeah, 3 weeks from now. So if you were to respond to, something like, yeah, prevent. So if you were to say something like that, like people might say, picture in your mind something that that would prevent something, prevent, yeah. So you picture in your mind something that you would need to prevent from happening. And so it's like, yeah, so the way we think about that right there, and your 102, that is to where that, okay, yeah, that, so whenever you do think about that in 102, that, try to put it right there, but, so if you were to respond to a question kind of like that right there, like, really, what is the worst thing that can happen? And you would say in there, picture in your mind, about something that you would need to prevent from happening. Really, what does that mean right there? Well, that means is to where to picture in your mind something, picture in your mind before, like, yeah, like everybody might say, is to where yeah, the things that you picture in your mind, right? The things that you picture in your mind are like what you call, like, yeah, so like, it's basically another way of saying is to word it, yeah, you go ahead and think in your mind about is to word it, yeah, really, what is the worst thing that can happen? But still, you picture in your mind about something, and you want to know too one way of how to prevent from that matter from getting any worse, and like people might say, is toward really that really what how would you handle that situation to where if you could picture in your mind, and I know a lot of times a lot of professionals would say too, is to where that whenever you do draw out the details and whenever you do sketch out the details about maybe certain moments in time to where to prevent this from happening and prevent that from happening in case that this does happen, et cetera, et cetera. And that is why it seems like that, every time you do think about that and people want to know too, why do you think that you would use still images for that reason? Why do you think that you would use some of these examples like, you would paint a picture, maybe you would go ahead and use a few documents just to put together any source of scenario or any source of examples of really, what is that really supposed to explain about anything really? But really, what it's really supposed to talk about is that is toward it if everybody knows exactly what you're talking about and ways of how to improve and ways of how to prevent something from the worst to happen, right? And so each time you do think about that in your 102 is that really, how can that really be explained? Just by looking at two pages, just by looking at maybe 5 pages, how can really anybody really understand all what you're talking about right there? And I guess the best answer for that is toward it. Number one, people might say that you really would really have to experience that. Number one, you really have to be there just to really understand what all that was going on during the time. But like everybody says, toward it, so whenever we're talking about is that with the responsibility here, with the key factor about responsibility is knowing as to where that back whenever you were younger, that you thought that you can handle this responsibility just by because as to where that you were actually looking forward to taking on this next opportunity, or like everybody else would even say too that you actually back whenever you were a teenager that you met a few friends there at the school or something like that, or you were able to so it's like in teenage years or anything like that, but still that but we're talking about like for if it's a marital license or anything like that, or maybe if it is being self-employed, I'm like, you're running a business or something like that. That you see things that maybe that you just cannot really explain about those most difficult challenges, and of course anything that you had to talk about, and maybe that's another reasons why, like we probably say is toward it whenever you do think about a responsibility though. That you probably think is toward it. That's another way of how do you want to call it is toward, well, not really about getting used to it, but also about is toward whenever you do think about a responsibility though, that you are talking about is toward that that a lot what have you really learned about it and knowing about how you're able to handle all those tasks, right? So like it sure seems that way that all that hard work that you put into something, and let's just say that these two page documents right here, like everybody might say is to where that that these 2 pages right here, it's supposed to includes everybody else might say is to where that this right here looks like a 3 pictures right here. This right here looks like a painting. And then also with a few wordings right here, but let's just say this right here is supposed to explain the responsibility that you put together from during the whole during the 6 weeks that you were working on that project, or during during the whole year that you were working on those tasks. That this is what you come up with, and this is all the work that you put together right here. So it sure seems that way. Not everybody's really going to understand all that, and for sure what you see right here is actually an example right here of talking about your disability, talking about a relationship, and talking about the things that you've learned from over the weeks and all that, maybe special gifts or something like that. But like everybody says, to where if you were to actually put together a 2-page spread right here of a document right here, you have right here is a front and back cover right here. And let's just say that if you were to show this, if you were to actually guide somebody, somebody and telling them that, that this is what you gotta do right here. You would include an image right here on the front right here, and you would talk about right here of the things you just to be able to help guide them, and the things that they would need to do and all that, and so that's why it seems like that each time you do think about responsibility, that the first thing that comes to your mind is to where that there's a lot of things about that responsibility that you thought that you can handle, a lot of things that you cannot really see. Number one, you're not really able to see all the details just by looking at this image right here with the background like this, and with this graphic, this image right here. So like everybody saying is that, you look at that right there, and a 102 is to where that, of course, it's not going to explain the whole story about what the key responsibility is, but at least it's going to give you an idea about is as to where that, whenever you do say your responsibility right here, it's another way of how you want to call it. It's like if you want to set a rule to where that whenever you're going to be filling out any applications or maybe working on anything important, that the first thing that's really going to come to your mind, of course, is going to be about is to where, really, that number one, that it's about, being, trying to remember what is needed, trying to remember what is needed and knowing about what is needed, knowing about what you need to do next, and it's all about what is needed and how you overcome those most difficult challenges and all that. And so it sure seems that way that so it's like whenever you do think about responsibility, though, that it's like so you're going to be asking that question toward it to anything that you learned while you were doing that, and anything that you really look forward to while you were working, and like everybody might say is to really that the only thing that I really look forward to doing for the most part is to where that, like everybody say, is to where that whenever you do whenever you first started working on something, for sure that there were a lot of times where times got really tough, and that's why it seemed like that when times got really tough, that's whenever you might want to know too, is to where that this job right here is really meeting your needs, is to where that you're going to ask the question to where if it's meeting the resources that are required just to be able to proceed with just to be able to improve your skills, right? And knowing about what you can handle. And so like everybody might say is to where that whenever you were a teenager, of course, whenever you were a teenager, you might think as to where you know what that's like to be able to go shopping for something, right? And go order something, go fill out an order for it, or maybe to audition to the club, maybe to the girls' singing club, or maybe to the choir, to the concert or something like that. But we're talking about is to where that you may want to know too that every time you do think about a responsibility, though, that you might think as to where that's really all what you gotta do is just write. It's a lot harder than what you thought it was, and so it's like so every time you do think about that, and your 102 is to where So at this right here, the way this ad is advertised, like everybody say that you look at these ads kind of like this right here, and you see right here the rules right here, and your QR code scanner and all that, and So if all this right here was all, the way it was all put together right here, to where it would make it easier for anybody really to understand for sure, and you want to know too, is to where, yeah, well, that looks pretty simple to, okay, yeah, I think, yeah, that looks very familiar. I think I can handle that, and so yeah, so every time you do think about responsibility, though, it seems like that you're looking at still photographs and looking at a few things that you can be familiar with whenever it comes to understanding about things, right? So whenever you do think of, like, yeah, you look at pictures, and maybe you think you look at things that really interest you whenever it comes to maybe gift wrap or something like that, and one, like everybody says, to really, who's this really supposed to be right here? I'm like, well, really, it's a example right there of two dating couples right there. Some of my Photoshop work, but I can remember working on this right here, and I can just remember that yeah, it was on New Year's Eve that I was working on this, and I was just thinking as to where that whenever you have two couples right here, and 102, that yeah, they're gonna be talking and dancing and all that, and you're warned to where that yeah, that on New Year's Eve that you talk about the things that you're looking forward to doing for New Year's, like around the New Year's holiday, and the things that you're looking forward to doing in the near future. And one of those things is maybe going to be about, yeah, talk about taking on a new responsibility is one of those things. Like, yeah, it could be a number of things that you're going to be talking about whenever we explain about responsibility, right? But half the time you're always 102 is to where that what's one, I'm like, yeah, anything that you may have missed about that responsibility, like everybody might say, is to where that yeah, you looked at those directions. You looked at the directions, and for sure that you may feel like, well, are you? Is there anything? Anything that you may have missed? Anything that you may have missed? From that conversation right there. But I'm like, well, really, that so every time you do. So every time, yeah, missed right here, and so it's like, yeah, so every time you do think about that, and 102, that when we do speak about I'm like, yeah. So every time you do think about that in 102, that yeah, from what you saw advertised from earlier, and 110, I'm like, yeah, anything that you saw advertised from earlier, and 102, that yeah, the things that